I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd tell this story. You know, the type who sits in silence, eyes fixed on a wall, wondering where it all went wrong. But here I am, pouring it out like spilled wine across the memory of a life I once believed was solid. My name's Caleb. I'm 37 now, but this began years ago. Back when I still believed in things like family loyalty, unconditional love, and the unshakable bond of marriage. Back when I thought my brother Jacob would always have my back. Back when I thought my wife, Alyssa, actually loved me. We weren't perfect, no one is, but we were steady. I met Alyssa at a friend's wedding. She wasn't the loudest woman in the room, but she had this quiet elegance, this way of making eye contact like you were the only person that mattered. I fell for her fast, and I fell hard. Within a year, we were married. 2 years later, we had our son, Matthew. A beautiful little boy who had her eyes and my stubbornness. Life, as far as I could tell, was good. And Jacob? He was always around. My younger brother by 2 years, the golden boy of the family. Charming, confident, always the one who could walk into a room and steal the spotlight without even trying. He had bounced around a bit. Some odd jobs, a few startups that never really got off the ground. But I never judged him. He was my brother. I helped him when I could. Let him crash at our place when rent got tight. Got him interviews through people I knew. Hell, I even gave him a job at my own firm when things looked bleak. Looking back now, it all feels so obvious. The nights he stayed a little too long. The way Alyssa laughed just a bit differently when he told one of his recycled jokes. How his cologne would linger long after he was gone. But back then, I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. I was busy. Work had picked up, thank God. And I was pouring everything into growing my small business. Long hours, endless meetings, traveling out of town 2, sometimes 3 nights a week. I thought I was doing it for us, for our future, for Matthew. The signs were there, of course. The way Alyssa had grown distant, colder. Her eyes didn't light up when I came home. The kisses were shorter, less frequent. I chalked it up to stress, to parenthood, to the weight of routine. She said she was tired all the time. I believed her. But there was one night I'll never forget. I came home early, flight had landed ahead of schedule, and I didn't tell anyone. I thought it would be a surprise. Bring home some flowers, take them out to dinner, reset the rhythm a little. You know, remind her of us. The house was quiet, too quiet. Matthew was with my mum for the weekend, some kind of bonding time she'd insisted on. I walked in with the flowers in hand, excited and a bit nervous. I hadn't done something spontaneous like this in a while. I figured she'd be in the kitchen or maybe upstairs catching a nap. Instead, I heard whispers. Low, urgent, coming from our bedroom. At first, I froze. It didn't register. My brain refused to accept it. I stepped closer. The door was cracked open just enough. And that's when I saw them. Her back was to me, bare. His hand, Jacob's hand, was tracing down her spine. They were laughing, whispering, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't barge in. I didn't scream. I just stood there, rooted to the floor, my soul crashing like glass against concrete. Something in me shattered that night, but not in the way you might expect. I didn't feel rage, not immediately. What I felt was stillness, like I had stepped out of my own life and was watching it burn from the sidelines. I left without them knowing. Drove around for hours, phone off, heart numb. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel pain, not yet. Just this heavy silence in my chest. Didn't confront them. Not that day. Not the next. I waited. I wanted to understand how long it had been going on, if it was a mistake or a choice. And it was a choice. Repeated. Deliberate. I started noticing things I hadn't seen before. Texts on her phone that she'd suddenly delete. Jacob coming around even when I wasn't home. Receipts for hotel rooms, for business meetings. Patterns formed, and the pieces clicked together. But here's the thing. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted them to show me who they truly were. I wanted to see the full extent of their betrayal before I made any move. Because once I acted, there would be no turning back. I slept in the guest room for weeks, told Alyssa I was overwhelmed with work. She didn't question it. She was always tired too. Jacob, the coward that he is, still smiled at me, still called me bro, still ate my food, drank my beer, and sat on my couch like he owned the place. And Alyssa, she played the perfect wife, packed my lunches, kissed me goodbye, and probably climbed into bed with my brother before I even pulled out of the driveway. They were careful, but not careful enough, and I was patient. You see, when a man's heart breaks in silence, it doesn't shatter, it hardens, and mine had become stone. Weeks passed. I kept up the facade. The overworked husband, the distracted father, the man too buried in spreadsheets to notice the subtle glances exchanged across the dinner table. Alyssa must have thought I was slipping away, too busy to care. And Jacob, he seemed to grow bolder, louder, more confident. He laughed more often, stayed later, like a parasite getting comfortable inside a host. What neither of them knew was that I had already started laying bricks for something much bigger, something quiet, something final. But then, something shifted. Alyssa began acting strange. Not the same cold distance she'd shown for months, but something else. Like guilt had finally begun to seep into her skin. She started asking if I was okay, if I was still happy with her. She'd reach for my hand in the car, cook meals I hadn't tasted in years. One night, she even brought out our wedding album, said she missed us. Her eyes looked glassy, like she was about to cry. I know I've been distracted, she whispered one evening as we sat on the porch. And I know things haven't felt right, but I'm willing to fix it if you are. She didn't say the words, didn't confess, but I could feel the tremble in her voice, the way her eyes scanned mine for some kind of permission, or maybe a warning. Part of me wanted to laugh, another part hesitated. What was this? Remorse? Manipulation? Or the beginning of a twisted plan to reel me back in before I found out the truth? I played along. I've been thinking about that too, I told her softly. Maybe we've both drifted, but maybe it's not too late. She looked relieved, smiled like a woman who had just avoided a near-death experience. That night, she held me as we lay in bed, her arms wrapped around me like they used to be. But her skin didn't feel the same. It felt colder, like a stranger's touch. I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling her breath on my neck, wondering how many nights she had laid like this, with Jacob. By morning, she was humming in the kitchen, making pancakes, acting like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I was drowning in questions. Was she truly sorry? Did she even know I knew? Was this a genuine attempt at repair, or just a precaution in case the lie began to unravel? I watched her closely in the days that followed. She called Jacob less, or at least didn't do it in front of me. No more surprise visits from him. No more, he just stopped by to borrow a charger nonsense. It was like she was slowly severing the thread between them, or at least trying to make it look that way. And Jacob, he felt it. He came by one evening, unannounced. Alyssa wasn't home. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes darting, behind me as if he expected to see her. "Where's Ali?" he asked. I shrugged. "Out." "Why?" "No reason," he said, stepping in anyway. "Haven't seen her around much." "Yeah, she's been reconnecting with herself," I said. Letting the words hang like smoke, he chuckled nervously. "Right. That's good." He sat down, grabbed a beer from my fridge without asking, like always. He started talking about some idea he had, a delivery app for dogs or something absurd. I nodded along, but I wasn't listening. Was watching how his eyes kept drifting to the staircase, how his hands fidgeted, How he tapped his foot against the table leg like a man desperate for control but slowly losing it. He was sweating. And I was calm, because I already knew his world was starting to crack. You see, guilt is funny. It doesn't always show up with tears and apologies. Sometimes it hides in silence, in avoidance, in cheap cologne and fake smiles. And Jacob, he was wearing all of it, but I still wasn't done watching. I needed to be sure, so I checked her phone, not by snooping. No, that would be beneath me. I simply waited until she left it on the charger one night and walked away. The messages weren't recent, but they were there. Threads from months ago, from when I was away in Atlanta, from the night I had come home early and caught them together. Messages like, "You're the only one who sees me. He's never home anyway. Do you think we'll ever tell him?" And Jacob, he had responded with, "We don't have to. He's too busy building his empire. Let him." That one broke something in me. Not because of the betrayal, I'd already felt that, but because of the arrogance, the assumption that I was blind, that I didn't matter, that I was nothing more than a provider they could both use until they were ready to toss me aside. That night, I walked into the backyard, sat in the darkness, and let the silence consume me. I wasn't angry, not in the way most people would be, was resolved, because this wasn't just about love anymore, or even betrayal. This was about respect, and I was going to take it back. But not by yelling, not by throwing punches or breaking things. No, I was going to end this the same way they started it, quietly. Something changed in me after that night in the backyard. I stopped asking why. I stopped hoping for apologies that would never come. I stopped wondering if she loved him more or if he ever felt guilty. Instead, I started preparing. I didn't want revenge just to feel better. I wanted something lasting, something that would remind them, both of them, that you can't build happiness on someone else's ruin and expect it to stand. First thing I did was meet with my lawyer. Not to file for divorce, not yet, just to ask questions. Quietly, like a man researching an investment. What are my rights as a father? What happens if infidelity is proven? Can I restrict visitation? Do I need evidence? I asked without showing my cards. Just in case. Then I started moving my assets. I separated the business accounts. Quietly removed her name from everything she didn't even know she was on. Transferred ownership titles from Caleb and Alyssa to C. Montgomery Holdings, a shell company I had started years ago for tax purposes. At the time, it felt excessive. Now, it felt brilliant. And Jacob, he was still jobless, still crashing on couches, borrowing money, pitching half-baked ideas to anyone who'd listen. He had burned every bridge but mine, or so he thought. A month later, I invited him to lunch. We sat at a little steakhouse on Main. He was hungover, hair messy, shirt unbuttoned too far, trying to pull off some kind of tech entrepreneur look that only made him appear lost. I ordered us 2 scotches and leaned in. "Listen," I said, "I've been thinking. I'm expanding the business. I want someone I can trust to help oversee operations." His eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. "You mean it," he said, grinning wide. "You want me?" I nodded, slow and calm. "Why not? You've got the charm. People like you. I just need someone I can depend on." He laughed, slapped my back. "Man, you don't know what this means to me." I knew exactly what it meant to him. I handed him a folder. Inside was a company card, a temporary apartment lease, paid for 6 months in advance, and a signed letter welcoming him as my head of external affairs. The title meant nothing. The apartment? Just a modest studio above a rundown hardware store. But to him, it was gold. He moved in that weekend, bragged about it all over social media. "Finally turning things around," he wrote under a selfie with the office building in the background. Meanwhile, at home, Alyssa continued her strange transformation. She was gentle, quiet. She brought me coffee in bed, wrote little notes, kiss my cheek before I left for work. She looked at me differently, not like a lover, but like someone afraid of being left behind. I started staying later at the office, told her I needed time to focus on the expansion. She didn't protest, and in those hours away, I built something. New team, a new space, a new identity. I even hired a private investigator, not because I needed more proof, I already had enough to blow it all apart, but because I wanted every detail. I wanted to understand the psychology of their betrayal. How often, where, for how long. Turns out, it had been over a year. Hotel rooms booked under fake names, weekends away when I was out of town, even dinners at places I had introduced her to. Places with memories. They had stolen everything and made it their own. The investigator gave me photos, timestamps, receipts. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I thanked him, paid in cash, and filed it all into a folder I labeled Truth. It sat on my desk like a ticking clock. Then one day, Alyssa asked me if we could talk. We sat in the living room. Matthew was asleep upstairs. She looked nervous, pale. "I've been thinking," she began, twisting her wedding ring. "Maybe we should go away. Just the two of us, like we used to." I stared at her, not coldly, just blankly. "Why now?" I asked. She hesitated. "I don't know. I miss us." I waited a moment. Then I said something I knew would sting in ways she couldn't name. "I think you miss who I used to be, but I'm not that man anymore." Her eyes flickered. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "that I see things more clearly now." She looked like she wanted to speak, to confess something, but she didn't. She just nodded and stood, saying she was going to bed early. And as she walked up the stairs, I noticed something. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring anymore. I stayed downstairs long after she went to bed. The clock ticked, the silence grew, and I just sat there, staring at the empty staircase. She hadn't worn her ring, not since that night. It was subtle, almost invisible to someone who wasn't looking. But I was always looking now. I had trained myself to notice the things I once ignored, small clues, micro-expressions, shifts in tone. And that missing ring, it wasn't an accident. She had made her choice. Or maybe she was testing, if I'd notice. But either way, I let her think she was still in control. Let her sleep soundly beside the man she'd betrayed. Let her play the good wife, while I moved quietly in the dark. The next week, I began setting the stage. It started with the office. I called Jacob into a meeting. Nothing formal, just coffee in the break room. I told him I had a new project in the works, something that required him to move to a different location, still under my name, still a leadership role, but more hands-on. He didn't ask questions, just nodded enthusiastically, said he was ready for the next level. I gave him a company laptop, one that looked like every other one we had. But this one had tracking software, keyloggers, remote access. He called it a promotion. I called it Phase 2. The second move came at home. I told Alyssa I'd signed up for therapy, couples therapy. Just to clear the air, I said. Maybe get us back on track. She was surprised, but said yes almost immediately. "I think that's a great idea," she said. "I want us to be okay." And for a moment, I almost believed her. Our first session was over Zoom, a licensed counselor I'd hired through a friend, strictly confidential. He asked questions. We gave careful answers. It was all very civilized, until she slipped. He asked her when things started to feel off in the marriage. She hesitated, said it had been a year, maybe longer, that she felt lonely even when I was home, that she didn't always feel seen. Her voice trembled when she said it, like she was holding back something bigger. I stayed quiet, nodded, took it all in. The therapist said, "Do you believe Caleb still loves you?" She looked away. "I think he used to. I think he's changed." He turned to me. "And do you still love her?" I paused, let the silence stretch just a bit too long. Then I said, "I'm learning how to be honest again." It was vague enough to sound hopeful, but she felt the weight in my words. After the session, she didn't speak, just went to bed without a word, and again, no ring. That same night, I opened the laptop Jacob had been using. Emails, messages, calendar events, and something curious. A reservation, a weekend getaway. 2 guests. Under an alias I recognized instantly, one he used back when he thought he was clever. The date was set for 2 weeks from now. Alyssa hadn't said a word. No mention of travel, no made-up story about a friend from college or a last-minute business trip. So I waited, played the loving husband, made breakfast, kissed Matthew on the forehead, texted her in the middle of the day just to say I missed her. She responded with heart emojis, a performance. But inside, I was calculating. Meanwhile, Jacob was enjoying his promotion. He started dressing better, bought new shoes, posted selfies with hashtags like New Beginnings and On My Grind. What he didn't realize was that the lease on his studio was running out, and I hadn't renewed it. The utilities, all under my company's name, the furniture, rented, everything he thought he owned, belonged to me. And that getaway he planned? I reserved the adjacent suite, using a different alias, paid in cash. I even made sure the hotel knew I'd be celebrating a quiet anniversary. Because when it all came down, I wanted to be close enough to hear the excuses. I wanted to see their faces, not through photographs, not through texts, but in person. Raw. Exposed. One night, a week before the trip, Alyssa sat me down. "Caleb," she said quietly, "I think we should take a short break." I tilted my head. "A break?" "Just a few days," she said. "I need to clear my head, get some space." I nodded slowly. "Do you already know where you'll go?" She blinked. Just a fraction of a second too long. "Maybe to Jenna's place," she said. "Or maybe the lake house." We didn't have a lake house, but Jacob had mentioned a rental near Lake Millwood in one of his messages. I'd already seen the confirmation email. I just smiled. "I think space might be good," I said. She looked relieved, as if the hardest part was over, and in a way, it was. Because after that night, I started closing every door I'd left open. For her. I called my lawyer again. "Prepare the documents," I said. Then I made one more call. To the investigator. "I need one last thing," I told him. "Make sure she brings her son on the trip." "Why?" "Because I'm going to show her what losing everything looks like." The day she left, it was raining. Not the kind of cinematic, dramatic rain you see in movies. Just a slow, steady drizzle. The kind that makes everything look a little more tired than it is. Alyssa wheeled out a medium-sized suitcase, gave me a small smile, and kissed Matthew on the forehead. He clung to her leg, asking why she had to go. "Just a few days, baby," she said softly. "I'll be back before you know it." I stood by the doorway, holding my coffee, watching. "You'll be okay?" she asked me, voice gentle. I nodded. "We'll manage." She hesitated for a second, looked like she wanted to say more. Maybe she was waiting for me to stop her, ask her to stay, fight for her, but I didn't. She drove away without looking back. I waited until the taillights disappeared. Then I called my lawyer. "Send the papers to the hotel, room 214, under the name she's using. Do it today." He didn't ask why. It just said, "Consider it done." After that, I called my investigator. He was already nearby, just like we planned. He had eyes on Jacob too. "They checked in 30 minutes ago," he told me. "They're alone, no kid, but I'll keep watching." That part stung a little. She'd told me she needed space, that she wanted to think. Instead, she'd packed lingerie and champagne. I'd seen the receipts. They ordered room service like it was a honeymoon. Laughed on the balcony. She wore a silk robe that I bought her 2 Christmases ago. It was one thing to cheat. It was another to do it like it meant nothing. But I kept my promise to myself. No screaming. No confrontations. Just truth. That night, I checked into the suite next door. I didn't even knock, didn't care to see it with my own eyes. I didn't need the theatre. I had enough. At exactly 9 p.m, I had the hotel front desk deliver an envelope to room 214. Inside was the divorce petition. Attached were printed photos, time-stamped, dated, verified, list of every lie she had told me. A copy of the email Jacob sent her with the subject line, "I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." And on top, a handwritten note from me. "You wanted space. Here it is, legally binding." I didn't wait for a response. I packed my bag and went back home to Matthew. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was Jacob. I let it ring. Then it buzzed again. Alyssa this time. Voicemail. "Caleb, please, we need to talk. I didn't want you to find out this way." I deleted it, and then came the flood. Texts, missed calls, emails with subject lines like, "I'm sorry," and "Please give me a chance to explain." But there was nothing left to explain. They had chosen each other. Now they could deal with the consequences. By the end of the week, the apartment Jacob was staying in was cleared. I terminated the lease, cancelled the utilities, removed his access to the company systems, disabled his card. He tried to come to the office. Security turned him away. Then he tried to call me. I answered that time. His voice was shaky. "What the hell, Caleb? You can't just... You had a job because I gave you one," I said, cutting him off. "You had a roof because I paid for it. You betrayed me in the house I let you sleep in. You used my name, my trust, and you smiled in my face every time. I made a mistake, all right? But she came to me. It wasn't just... I didn't yell, didn't curse, just said one word, goodbye. Then I blocked his number." Later that day, Alyssa came by the house. I was out front watering the garden. Matthew was inside with my mother. She stood at the gate, umbrella in hand, face pale. No makeup, no rehearsed smile. "Please," she said, "can we talk? Just 5 minutes." I looked at her for a long moment, and I saw everything. The guilt, the fear, the crumbling certainty. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. She was someone else, someone I didn't know. I walked over, calmly, quietly, opened the gate halfway. "You have 5 minutes," I said. She stepped in, trembling slightly. "I messed up," she whispered. "I know that, but I never stopped loving you. It was just, things got complicated. I was lonely. You were always gone." I said nothing. She went on. "Jacob, it wasn't supposed to happen. It started with just talking. I felt like he listened. I felt seen. And I know that doesn't justify anything, but..." "It doesn't," I interrupted gently. She stopped. Tears welled in her eyes. "I want to fix this," I sighed. "You can't fix a house you burned down, not when you poured the gasoline and struck the match yourself." She tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. "The papers are signed," I said. "You'll get your copy soon." "I don't want money," she said quickly. "I don't want anything. I don't want to lose my family." "You already did," I said. Then I closed the gate. She stood there, in the rain, holding that umbrella like it could shield her from the weight of her choices. But it couldn't, and neither could I. A week passed. Alyssa stopped coming by. Jacob stopped trying to call. The silence was almost beautiful. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. I could sit with Matthew in the evenings, help him with homework, read him bedtime, stories, and not feel the weight of lies pressing on my shoulders. I had taken back my peace. and it tasted like clarity. But there was still one more piece to this, because as much as I didn't care for revenge, I did care for truth, and I believed in consequences. That's why I called my parents. We hadn't spoken in months. Not really, not since the cracks began showing. They had always adored Jacob. He was their charmer, their golden boy. Meanwhile, I was the dependable one, the safe bet, the one who built a stable life and never needed bailing out. But that favoritism, it had protected him, enabled him, and I was done playing the silent son. "Can we have dinner?" I asked. "At my place, just the family." They agreed, surprised but eager. When they arrived that Saturday evening, I'd set the table myself, cooked my father's favourite lamb dish. Matthew helped fold napkins. Everything looked perfect. Until Jacob showed up. He looked off, like a man who hadn't slept in days. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven. He walked in slowly, eyes darting, avoiding mine. "Thanks for the invite," he muttered. I nodded. "You're still family." He flinched at that. Dinner began light. My parents gushed over Matthew. My mother complimented the wine. For a moment, you might have thought we were just a normal family having a meal together. Then I stood up, tapped my glass. "I'd like to say a few words." They all turned toward me, forks halfway to their mouths. "I know things have been strained lately," I said calmly, "and I take responsibility for not reaching out sooner." My mother smiled. "We're just happy you brought us together again." I nodded. "That's why I wanted tonight to be honest." Jacob stiffened. My father leaned in. "Honest?" I turned to them. "Do you remember when I asked you to trust me? When I said there were things happening you didn't understand?" They exchanged glances. "Yes," my father said slowly. I placed the manila envelope on the table. Inside were the photos, the messages, the receipts, evidence of betrayal so clear it couldn't be denied. I didn't open it, just slid it across the table toward my father. "That's everything," I said. "Everything you didn't want to believe." My mother's hand trembled as she reached for it. Jacob spoke up, voice cracking. "Caleb, don't. I'm not doing this to shame you." I interrupted. "I'm doing it because they deserve the truth." The room fell silent as my father flipped through the pages. His face paled. My mother gasped. Tears welled in her eyes. "Alyssa?" she whispered. I nodded. "With him?" my father asked. Again, I nodded. Jacob couldn't look at them. I turned to him. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed them, too. The people who defended you when you didn't deserve it. The people who made excuses for your mistakes and called it potential." He tried to speak, but nothing came out. My father's voice was low, gravelly. "You did this in his house." Jacob lowered his head. "In front of his child?" My mother was crying now, quiet sobs behind her hands. The weight of it crushed the air in the room. I poured myself another glass of wine and sipped it slowly. "I've filed for divorce," I said. "Full custody. I have more than enough to win. Alyssa won't fight. She's too ashamed. Or maybe just too tired." My father stared blankly at the folder. "She's not allowed in this house anymore," I added. "And neither is he." Jacob looked up, eyes red. "Caleb, please. I've lost everything. I have nowhere to go." I met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "Good." He blinked. "Because now you understand what it's like to be stripped of safety," I continued. "To feel the foundation under you collapse because someone you trusted made a choice, not a mistake, a choice, to ruin it." My father stood up, walked to the window. "I don't know who you are," he said to Jacob. "But you're not my son." Jacob broke then. He begged, first them, then me. Said he had nowhere to sleep, that he was crashing at a friend's place, that he was sorry. But it was too late. "I didn't throw you out," I said. "You did that yourself, when you chose her over blood. He tried to step forward, but my father raised a hand. "Get out! Dad, get out, Jacob." He stood there for a moment, broken, shaking, then turned and walked out into the night, alone. My mother followed my father silently to the couch, still crying. I took Matthew upstairs, tucked him into bed. He didn't ask about the noise. He just looked at me and said, "I love you, Daddy." I kissed his forehead. "I love you more." That night, I stood at the window and watched the street. Jacob was sitting on the curb, head in his hands. But I didn't go out, because sometimes mercy isn't a gift, it's a lesson withheld until it's earned. The morning after the dinner, I woke up earlier than usual. The air felt different, not lighter, not heavier, just still, as if something deep inside had finally stopped fighting. I stood at the window again, but the curb where Jacob had sat all night was now empty. No sign of him, no goodbye, and that was fine. I didn't need closure. I already had it. Later that day, my lawyer called to confirm that Alyssa had officially responded to the divorce petition. No contest, no claims, no arguments, just a signature, clean and simple. Her message was clear. She knew there was nothing left to fight for. I still remember standing in the kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, staring out into the backyard where Matthew was playing with his toy truck. The sun caught his hair just right, and I realized he was the only thing that ever really mattered. All the rest, the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it had all been noise. Painful noise, yes, but still noise. And now, the volume had finally been turned down. Over the next few weeks, life started taking on a new rhythm. I returned to the gym, not to chase revenge or try to win the breakup, but just to feel myself again. I cooked dinner most nights, sometimes for Matthew, sometimes just for me. I let silence sit at the table, and for once, it wasn't a punishment, it was peace. Alyssa reached out once more, just one message. "I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll be able to forgive me, not for me, but for yourself." I stared at it for a while, not because it moved me, but because for the first time, I realized I didn't feel anything. No bitterness, no rage, just nothing. That was the real freedom. I never replied. Jacob vanished from our family's orbit. I heard whispers that he was couch surfing, trying to land small gigs, always one step behind stability. My parents cut him off entirely, not because I asked. I never would. But because they had to look in the mirror and face the truth about the son they had idolized for too long. Ironically, he had finally become what he pretended not to be. A man without a home, without trust, without honor. And me, I wasn't rebuilding. I wasn't starting over. I was simply beginning, maybe for the first time. One Saturday afternoon, Matthew and I visited the park. Just the two of us. We sat on the swings, talked about nothing, laughed about everything. He asked me, "Why don't we see Mummy anymore?" I took a breath. She made some choices, buddy. Grown-up choices that hurt people. Sometimes when that happens, it's better to give each other space. He looked at me, confused, but didn't ask further. He just nodded and went back to kicking the dirt with his shoe. Kids are like that, resilient in ways adults forget how to be. That night, I found myself journaling, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a single line. "They took my trust, but I kept my dignity." And that was enough. Because it was enough. I didn't need them to regret it. I didn't need the world to cheer me on or validate my pain. All I needed was to stand on my own 2 feet, look in the mirror, and know that I had walked through fire and never once lost my soul. One day, maybe I'll meet someone new, maybe not. Either way, I'll be okay, because I know now. Peace doesn't come from the absence of betrayal. It comes from surviving it without becoming someone you're not. So if you're listening to this, wondering how you'll ever get through that kind of hurt, let me tell you something. You don't heal by holding on. You heal by letting go and walking away, quietly, gracefully, with your head held high.